Hello, it's the Guardian film show in which a bunch of cantankerous, malodorous critics steer a virtual van right up your drive. Provided you let us use the facilities, we may consent to stay for years.
Whoa! What the f***?
Oh boy.
Help me off!
Coming up on this week's show, director Sean Baker takes his iPhone for a walk on the wild side of West Hollywood with the tart and tangy Tangerine. Convicted killer Nick Yaris spins a tale from death row in the documentary Fear of 13. And if Alex Jennings is Alan Bennett, that surely makes Maggie Smith the lady in the van.
See one?
You all right, my love? Looking especially lovely today, sweetheart?
Don't sweetheart me. I'm a sick woman, dying possibly.
All right, well, chin up, love. We all got to go sometime. Smells like you already have.
But we begin on an altogether more salubrious note amid the stark, glossy splendour of the Steve Jobs biopic, directed by Danny Boyle and scripted by Aaron Sorkin. And the launch is scheduled for right about now.
It's a system error.
Fix it.
Fix it?
Yeah.
We're not a pit crew at Daytona. This can't be fixed in seconds.
You didn't have seconds. You had 3 weeks. The universe was created in a third of that time.
Well, someday you'll have to tell us how you did it.
It's the life of Apple co-founder Steve Jobs, broken into 3 acts, framed by 3 fraught product launches, and embodied at all times by a polar-necked Michael Fassbender. This driven, dysfunctional man is out to connect the whole world. And inevitably, that means an abundance of dialogue. Joined in a social networking capacity by Peter Bradshaw and Catherine Shoard. Peter, that Aaron Sorkin likes talking.
He certainly does, the great man. I think this is almost like a kind of franchise-branded Aaron Sorkin kind of script. I mean, I love it. It's exhilarating and very exasperating in the way that his scripts always are, because you are just being hectored and barracked, but by somebody very, very kind of clever and difficult and offbeat. I really love the way Aaron Sorkin has once wrote about the American president, admittedly a president of his own imagining and politics, and has migrated to what's more important, i.e. social networking and digital technology. He's sensed something, I think, rather interesting, that is where real cultural heft and power resides. And admittedly, he does imagine Mark Zuckerberg and Steve Jobs as very similar people in some ways, although Steve Jobs is an older man with domestic encumbrances, which is more interesting.
2 million people read Time. How am I
It would be
supposed
more if they put me on the cover, but Dan
I
Cocky
applied for
decided to
welfare
kidney punch
yesterday.
me. I'm sorry?
I said I applied for welfare yesterday. The Time article said your Apple stock was worth $441 million. And I wanted to ask you how you felt about that.
Well, I feel like Apple stock has been dramatically undervalued. This would be a good time to get in.
Peter was saying that having an older man at the centre was more interesting, but I actually found this to be a lesser film than The Social Network, which I loved.
Yeah, and I think part of that is the dominance of Sorkin. I saw this at an early screening and they were all there. And after one sort of thundering, climactic back and forth, there was sort of silence and somebody in the back row just shouted out, Sorkin! Which is the ultimate sort of bro thing. And I think that's right. And I mean, I sort of think there's a lot to be said for that. But you've got to follow it through. And if you're going to have this 3-act structure, you've got to not cheat with flashbacks. And also, you've got this thing, you've got 3 product launches. So you've got a very similar structure to all the 3 acts, which I think was sort of felt a little bit repetitive. And I think you're right that he's identified that the centre of power has moved away from politics towards figures like this sort of slightly sociopathic guy who's influencing the way in which we all think. And that's interesting. However, the nitty-gritty of what it comes down to, these conflicts, as Ben said in our initial review of this, it's about whether or not people will realise this optional hard drive isn't really optional, and whether or not he should acknowledge this person in public or not. And these are quite sort of, you've really got to care quite hard about things that are given a lot of oomph. And I'm actually ultimately not sure. He says, oh, well, I wasn't interested in doing a cradle to grave biopic. Steve Jobs is quite interesting in terms of cradle to grave. The grave is very, very interesting. The cradle with all the adoption stuff. His other family, which doesn't mention in this at all, is all quite interesting as well. So sort of ultimately, I'm not quite sure. No, for me, Social Network is I mean, I wouldn't watch this again. I would totally watch.
Social Network is better. It's a better film, but I still think this is very good.
You can't write code. You're not an engineer. You're not a designer. You can't put a hammer to a nail. I built the circuit board. The graphical interface was stolen from Xerox PARC. Jeff Raskin was the leader of the Mac team before you threw him off his own project. Everything, someone else designed the box. So how come 10 times in a day, I read Steve Jobs as a genius? What do you do?
I play the orchestra.
That's Michael Fassbender as Steve Jobs, and of course the man's legacy lives on all around us, not least in our very next film, which was entirely shot on an iPhone 5S. Turns out it took Apple to make Tangerine. This is Cindy, a transgender sex worker fresh out of prison on a sunny LA Christmas Eve. She's heard that Chester, her boyfriend, has hooked up with some floozy called Dinah, and so she's off through the streets like an angel of vengeance or a furious Santa shouldering a whole sack of whoop-ass. Catherine, we'll get onto the film's other qualities in a moment, but it certainly looks good, doesn't it?
It looks astonishing. I mean, I thought my photos were good. But no, this is amazing. I mean, I don't think it's just one iPhone, I would say, and I think it has special add-ons, which I don't understand.
It's an app called Filmic Pro, which costs £7.99. I think it does look incredible, doesn't it? Although, as ever, when we hear about ultra no-budget films that have been shot on your iPhone, clearly a lot of money has been spent on post-production and correction on the screen. So as it looks good on the big screen. But yes, what an incredible lens on that phone. Not even the most recent iPhone, but yeah, unbelievable.
So, I got some good news to tell you.
What?
I've been keeping a secret about me and Chester.
Girl. Woo! I know what it is. You're breaking up with him. Thank God. Because, honey, for him to be cheating on you like that.
Wait, what?
You didn't know?
It's kind of fun too, isn't it?
Yeah, and Peter's right that a lot of it is the edit. I mean, it's great. It's a great film and really surprising and really grabs you and you can't really stop watching it, which is good. But I think a lot of it is the edit, it's sound mix, it's kind of punking it up in post-production. I'd be really interested to see the sort of rushes on this. I did suppose it was very different. I think the script is quite, it was quite scripted in this way, and you've got these sort of Taxi Tehran moments with the Armenian cab driver that break it up initially and then come together with the girls. It's fantastic, and I love that it's really it's not about being transgender at all.
No.
It's just an immersion in that world that's really startling and winning and mean and
accepted by everybody, it seems. Even the cops are just kind of
Oh, Alexandra. It's like, and the bits and the sort of sex scenes that you get. So the bit where the cabbie picks up a ride who doesn't turn out to be quite what he's expecting, and the bit where there's a problem with a guy in a car and the sort of fallout from that. They're just absolutely brilliant. They're just frank and funny and unsexy and interesting in a way that's I've never seen anything like it.
You owe you money?
We made a business transaction.
You're not even hard yet.
Hard. That's hard.
Well, it's sort of in the spirit of the old kind of Paul Morrissey, Andy Warhol films, isn't
Yeah,
it, really?
I'm almost inclined to say it's kind of a new wave feel to it, a kind of loose, this is what the city really does look like, and we somehow made it, even though it looks ordinary, it looks fantastic at the same time. Making West Hollywood look at sort of simultaneously kind of terrible and scuzzy, and yet it's a shock when you suddenly realise you're starting to see the Hall of the Star of Fame things on the sidewalk and think, wait, Jesus, we're in the glamorous bit of Los Angeles. Why does it still look shite?
But that is what's weird about that area, that it all feels kind of jerry-built on the side of the hill.
And then suddenly you're seeing these stars and think, oh my God, that's incredible.
Nice kind of farcical scene in the donut shop at the end. I mean, some of the acting was a bit drama workshop, but even that rough and ready feel worked in its favour.
Yeah, and I'm not 100% sure from my memories of LA this autumn that people don't act like that. I think isn't that LA?
Yeah, well, LA, everyone's bad actors in LA.
Exactly.
Girl, wait, I cannot do this. I cannot do this. It's too much drama.
You just come out here and give me all this information and have me go handle it by myself. You're the one who told me anyway.
Okay. I will go with you under one condition. You must promise me that there's not going to be any drama. Because as soon as there's some drama, I'm out of there.
I promise.
Look at me in my eyes and promise.
I promise no drama, Alexandra. Come on. What the fuck you two looking at?
Pimps, Prostitutes and Johns in Tangerine, which I guess technically counts as the first Christmas movie of the season, so do be sure to take the whole family. Next up, we come to Fear of 13, in which the budget and confines are arguably even more constrained. One room, one man, one fascinating story.
I ask that one right that I have be recognized, and that is a condemned man's right to be executed.
Nick Yaris has spent 2 decades on death row in Pennsylvania for a crime he says he did not commit. So why is an innocent man now petitioning for an end to his appeals and a quick execution? Director David Sington turns on the camera and lets Yaris explain. Peter, it says at the start this is all independently verified, which I think is a crucial thing to say considering the twists and turns of this film.
Yeah, I got to admit I have a problem with this film. I think this guy has endured an incredible ordeal and he deserves and gets respect for this. He's emerged with real dignity from this incredible ordeal as an innocent man, and I'm absolutely prepared to accept that. The problem for me is that David Sington is a very, very, very well-regarded documentary maker, and this is for the famous Storyville strand for the BBC. He's effectively turned over the entire film to him. He's effectively let him narrate it and determine its pace and its tone and its content and everything. And the problem is, he sounds like a bad actor auditioning for the role of himself. He just recites everything in this very over-rehearsed monologue, which he's had decades to rehearse in his head. But it sounds overwritten, over-rehearsed, and he has this, frankly for me, unendurable, breathy, mellifluous voice that he puts on, as if he's auditioning for some role in Scorsese.
It actually made me mistrust him from the start.
I almost felt, wait, is this... I almost felt, is this a fictional version? Is this like a dramatised reconstruction? Is this guy an actor? Is the real Nick Yaris going to come on in a minute? This movie, I think, is a real missed opportunity because it is an extraordinary story. It's not quite how it's billed. It's an important story about a miscarriage of justice. I totally believe that. And I totally believe that this guy has had a tragic and difficult life, and he's responded to this extraordinary Dostoevskian ordeal with enormous dignity. But this movie, his style is just unbearable. It frankly is unbearable. I wanted a different kind of movie about him.
I felt that David Sington was going slightly for the Errol Morris approach, wasn't it? It was cutting away everything else and just having the subject looking straight down the barrel of the camera and speaking. But whereas with Morris, there's the sense of him forensically interrogating the person, even if you don't actually hear him doing that. Here, it's very much turning the whole film over to the subject.
Yeah, I think Morris starts from a point of view of not knowing about the thing, whereas this, you wouldn't be able to have done this without hearing this guy say it exactly like he says it in the film all the way through endlessly. I think it's right. You know what an ordeal, and you don't really feel for him because you think, stop it. But it reminded me of nothing as much as Crime Watch because of this sense of a bad actor reconstruction, and because Singleton cuts in sort of, you know, stock footage of kind of when there's an attack in the shower of a drain with blood, you know, and it's like, it's just lazy. I just couldn't get along with it either, I'm afraid. It's a weird film.
Robert is a triskaidekaphobic. Robert is afraid of the number 13. Robert does not understand that it's just an illusion that 13 can harm him. And I would just talk to myself until, like, I had that one down. Then I would move on to phantasmagoria, and I would understand that phantasmagoria was the fear of ghosts. And I'd like, boo! Oh, I was just afraid, you know, and so I just play with it. And it just became like this stupid image of like this kid sitting in a room by himself, entertaining himself with words.
That's the teasing, troublesome Fear of 13. And finally, we turn from a tale of a man behind bars to a woman outside the law. It's a true-ish tale from Alan Bennett, independently verified. It's The Lady in the Van. Maggie Smith is Miss Shepherd, ripe as old cheese and abrasive as pepper spray, who turns her van into a leafy Camden street back in 1970. And Alex Jennings is Alan Bennett, the famous writer, shaking his blonde mop in exasperation. Will he ever get shot of the lady in the van? Catherine, would you give your drive over to a lady in a van?
Of course, it already looks like a car park, so yes, loads of them huddled there. I mean, I think that's one of the weird things about this, is that it's a very funny thing about liberal guilt and compassion and the extent to which it goes, and people really mean it. But because Maggie Smith first played this role about 20 years ago, she was then about 60, and then presumably Miss Shepherd looked eccentric. Here, she looks very, very old.
She does, yeah.
And so it really looks like elder abuse that she's living in this van. I mean,
Well, he's sitting in his comfortable sitting room.
It does. It changes the balance a little bit drastically. And probably, both in the story and in the play, the sort of extent of these massive Gloucester Crescent townhouses. They're sitting on like £4 million worth of house here. So the disparity is really hammered home by seeing it quite so graphically and seeing Maggie Smith's, terribly old face.
She looks
now.
like Willie Nelson. I was thinking she could play Willie Nelson in a biopic.
That's good.
I've never seen them in the same van at the same time.
But yeah, I mean, you couldn't do it better. I gave it 3 stars on first review, and I regret that. I think it should be 4. But there are issues with putting this on the screen.
Peter, did you have issues?
Not really, no. I mean, I think it is an extraordinary true story. I think Maggie Smith it can be terrible on film, but this is very good.
She's very good in this, because she doesn't ask for sympathy.
No.
There's no point where she really tips into sentimentality
I love
at all.
that, absolutely. She never says thank you. It's brilliant, the scenes where all these hand-wringing liberal types wait for her to say thank you, and she never does. And she never lets, as it were, any good deed go unpunished. She always is very severe with people who help her. And I love all that. And I think it's certainly a very interesting insight into Alan Bennett's life as to why exactly he did it. It was partly timidity and reticence and a muddled sense of decency and unable to say no, but partly, as I think the film conveys, is he wanted an alibi for his own lack of anything happening in his own life. He really did need an alibi, and that was it. It was Miss Shepherd. 15 years. It's incredible, really. I mean, I think his own very considerable celebrity prestige is what protected her from everybody else in the street, and I think possibly the film could have been a little more candid about that. And the film dances around the question of whether or not he intended to use her as material from the word go, because he keeps on denying that, and I'm not sure how convincing those denials actually are. But what I think is fascinating is the idea that she was an invisible muse to him, that she, in fact, created the Talking Heads monologue. She gave him this insight into loneliness and old age, because she does seem to have been an extraordinary talker and pure gold from his point of view, absolute gold.
Telling me about paint. I was in infant school. I won a prize for painting.
Divine!
Still, there were few occasions on which one saw her genuinely happy. And one of these was when she was putting paint on.
Jackson Pollock himself could not have done it better.
That's the redoubtable Maggie Smith in The Lady in the Van, and with that we come to rest in a tumult of ladies and vans, apples and tangerines. My thanks to Peter and to Catherine and to you for watching. The fruit stall reopens at the same time next week.
Father Flood sponsored me. He found me a job.
They told you a date for the nylon sale yet, Hamish? Oh, dear God. I'll thank you to keep his name out of a conversation about nylons.